of Locked On Lightning, we talk about, does the lack of exciting moves for Tampa this offseason make for a very busy trade deadline? We talk about that and more. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I would like to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for making us your first watch of the day. This episode, where we'll be talking about, does the somewhat quiet, I'll say quiet, it's been dead. Let's be honest here. You know, we like to talk about ongoing stories or potential stories throughout the NHL offseason, but I think we could all agree the NHL offseason is probably one of the deadest parts in all of sports. It seems like other sports, you know, there's always some excitement going on, some drama. But really, other than the Matthew Tkachuk drama and Johnny Gaudreau going to Columbus, for the NHL as a whole, there really hasn't been a lot going on. And the same could be said for the Lightning. Now, there has been moves here and there. Nothing too exciting. No really big names. I guess the biggest name that is has a potential chance of moving or still being thrown around is Alex Killorn. Now we have to sit and watch and wait until something breaks about that. Really, I said it on earlier episodes. I think if the Lightning haven't moved him right after the NHL draft or prior to the NHL draft, we might see this potentially boil over into training camp, which is an unfortunate situation to have for Tampa. Like I said on earlier episodes, the longer they hold on to Killorn, the most likely the more further down his value will go as time goes on and teams have a chance to really think about things. And it's not so much a criticism towards the Lightning in terms of really the really unexciting part that is the NHL offseason for Tampa, just because of the cap situation that they are in. Now, having said that, if you look at capfriendly.com as your reference, as I'm talking about this episode, as I am as well, their projected cap space as of opening night, and now this will obviously change. There will be moves made, whether it's Alex Killorn or other names being sent up or down, whether you're referring geographically or just to the minors in terms of tiers. There might be names be sent to Syracuse or players on LTIR. Names such as we will be missing Anthony Cirelli to start the regular season, and then also as of now, Zach Bogosian is on injured reserve as well. So we'll see what, off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with Bogo. Drawing a blank right now at that, but obviously Cirelli getting surgery, that is the big issue. That is the guy that the Lightning are most likely going to miss more. Whether you're defensive minded or offensive minded, whenever you miss a guy like that or are missing a guy like that who could do so much of everything, it's definitely going to leave somewhat of a hole in your lineup. Now, this begs the question. Now, with there was contracts extended, there was players brought in, there was other players that left. It begs the question, and one can't help but wonder, with the little amount of move made, because let's be honest, yes, the Lightning did make moves in this free agency period, which is fantastic. But these aren't really, in my opinion, yes, they are game changers, but they are not. They aren't game changers. They're more so pieces here and there to add depth that the Lightning are always looking to add. And really, something, you can't, I'm not saying they're terrible moves. I'm not saying the Lightning are obviously at fault for not making big moves. They're coming into this offseason before the playoffs before the Stanley Cup started. They were the two-time defending Stanley Cup champions. They've been to the Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row. And really they've had some of the toughest roads to winning championships. Pretty much, I in my opinion, and that might sound a little biased being the host of a Lightning show, some of the toughest roads to winning championships that I think have ever been taken by an NHL team. Now, having said that, does this mean going forward in the season, once Julien Brisebois, because this will be resolved, whether it be at the trade deadline, it will definitely have to be resolved before the season. Little moves here and there, like I said, but does the low number of moves or the, I guess, high impact of moves there really, or moves not made because of budgetary constrictions, does this mean that we shall see a very eventful or very exciting trade deadline, depending on where the Lightning are in terms of their cap space, depending on what pieces they have to trade away, as well as, what other pieces are teams looking at? Now, obviously, the Lightning most likely will make a deal with a team that is a bottom of the barrel team, whether it be Arizona, who is known for taking on contracts, Seattle, a team who is looking to, no pun intended, make a splash in the NHL still. And other teams as well. The Islanders, I think I was talking about this with my co-host from Locked On NHL, Locked On Avalanche host, Chris Masilli. We were just texting back and forth, and I was saying to him when we were putting together our show was that I don't think a lot of people realize how bad the New York Islanders are going to be this year. So why I think that might be something that Lightning fans should maybe look towards in terms of possible moves being made, because the name that comes to mind is Matt Barzal. Now, money-wise, that will have to be worked out at that point in time. And I'm not going to sit here and speculate as to what kind of add-ons may or may not be brought into that trade or a potential deal between both parties. But that is a name, and I've spoken about this. I spoke about this at the during the World Championships. I spoke about this during the regular season at times. I'm sure I've mentioned it the previous two Cup runs where the Lightning and the Islanders play each other in the conference finals. Matt Barzal is a very talented player. Let's not kick rocks on that one. Let's not beat around the bush. Very talented player, and we have seen when he has played for Team Canada what he is capable of when he has players that are able to help him on the ice. And that is why I have heavily criticized the New York Islanders over the last couple of years over not surrounding him with players that could help him out. You look at the list of names on that team, and that guy, the offensive production is really laid at his feet. And Lou Lamoriello, which I've killed a ton on Twitter, go ahead and look at my tweets, really just wasting a very talented player who really has that potential, if he's in the right situation, to be a top 10 player. And he's not. Just in my opinion, I don't think Matt Barzal is a top 10 player. Some people might disagree with me. I think he's definitely a top 10 forward. He's not a top 10 player. And that's no knock against him. He has potential to be top 10. And I think his style of play, the way he sees the ice and he plays off puck situations, would be perfect. Would be absolutely perfect in Tampa, especially if the Islanders are willing to look at themselves in the mirror at that point in time, at a potential trade deadline deal with Tampa, where they realize, all right, especially if Matt Barzal, if I'm Matt Barzal and the Islanders are dead last in the league behind certain teams or at the bottom of the barrel, I'm telling my agent, I'm telling Lou Lamoriello, get me the hell out of here, put me on a playoff team. And I'm looking at Tampa as definitely, just by my style of play, I'm looking at Tampa on a potential line with Braden Point, possibly Nikita Kucherov, Anthony Cirelli on my side, or Nick Paul, and Brandon Hagel. The list goes on, and it can be interchangeable of the names of players that would be very successful with Matt Barzal, and the list of players that Matt Barzal would be successful with on this Tampa team. So that's one name to bring out there. Obviously, we are at the end of July, so we have a long ways to go until the trade deadline. We'll talk about more potential players realistically on my radar. We'll talk about that. Some free agent names that we will bring up, some players' names that will be up, whose contracts will be up after this year. We'll talk about that. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor on today's show, and that is betonline.net. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check on all your sports betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So once again, I would like to thank everybody for making this show your first listen of the day. For watching us on YouTube, thank you for making us your first watch of the day. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Whether you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell, give us a thumbs up, comment below, whether it be for a mailbag or just general comments about the show. Just be respectful with each other. That's all we ask here. And then go ahead, and if you're listening to us on an audio platform, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. We are available wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. And go ahead and follow us on our social media pages at @LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from all of you, and I try to get back to all of you as soon as possible when I can. So, continuing the discussion, and realistically, do the Lightning right here? If I had to bet money at this right now, this episode is being dropped on July 28th. Realistically, unless something drastic happens with the Lightning's cap situation, where I feel like this would be a situation where the Lightning, it would take more than just Alex to be leaving Tampa for a player of not only is a big name, but has the caliber, as such as previously mentioned, Matt Barzal. And especially, I don't think Julian Reese-Boss would make a deal for a player like that at the deadline unless it was absolutely crucial. And what I'm referring to, and hopefully this isn't the case, knock on wood, is that one of the other big names is not only out for a prolonged period of time, whether it be, and I spoke about it in the last episode, whether it be the usual suspects, Cooch, Stammer, or Point. One of those guys, it always seems, and no fault of their own, they play hard, they play physical. It always seems like one of those three names are out for an extended period of time. And also the other circumstances that would go into play with this would be the Lightning are on the fringe of making the playoffs. I'm talking about fighting for that last wild card spot. I think that would be the only situation in which Julian Reese-Boss would make a deal of that caliber. But one could dream. Who knows? Maybe once JBB gets the caps situation a little bit more in control, gives himself some breathing room. And who knows? We've only heard certain the vanilla statements from JBB, from Cooper, from these players. Yes, they're upset that they lost the cup, but I'm sure deep down it burns them up that, looking back on it, that regret that, players and, people like they're human beings. So I'm sure there's certain things that they look back on, whether it be the players or the executives or the coaches, they look back on and they wish they did differently. Other names that I'm looking at now, interesting names. And if you want to follow along, go on Spot Track, go to the 2023 NHL free agents list. And these are all the players at the moment whose contracts do end after this upcoming season. And I'm only looking at players who are realistic moves to be made for. And so the players I'm looking at are, maybe a Pierre-Luc Dubois. Winnipeg is kind of in a weird spot. They didn't really have so much of a good year last year. And I think if they don't get off to a good start, I think by the trade deadline, especially if they're completely out of it, if they're not fighting for a second wild card spot, I think maybe they might deal him. Um, he's due to make $6 million this year. His cap hit is going to be $6 million. So that would be an interesting move to be made. I think Luc Dubois, and like I'm saying, this is all hypothetical, but one can dream. I think Dubois would make, especially in the right situation, and a lot of people, and he's also restricted, which I don't know if Julian Reese was, and especially if I'm the GM, I'm looking more so for an expiring contract for a guy who's going to be a UFA, where you're not going to be caught in a situation where you're going to have to begrudgingly have to try and sign this guy. Whereas, because I don't feel like, especially if the Lightning, if Dubois comes to Tampa, plays very well, because he's going to get paid. He deserves it. He's a very talented player. I think that, and he's still very young. He's only 25. I think he's the kind of player where he's going to get paid, maybe get bumped up to maybe 7, 8, depending on what kind of market he's playing in, what kind of franchise. And I don't want the Lightning to put themselves in a situation, more of a tough situation, by having to almost begrudgingly pay a guy like that. So a UFA is probably more in the kind of wheelhouse that the Lightning would be looking for. So why don't you hit your filters right now and look at those UFAs? Because I'm looking at another name that would be interesting. I think like a year ago would have been perfect, especially, or maybe actually 2 years ago. 2 years ago would probably be Vladimir Tarasenko. You could have maybe convinced, because there was some speculation as to what kind of player he was going to be after that double shoulder surgery that he was coming off of. And you never know with these kind of injuries, especially with players, how it's going to affect just their movements and how they're going to compensate, because there is going to be that initial soreness, pain, possibly post-op. And his cap hit was 7.5 this year. So, the interesting thing would be is what could there have been a deal, because there was some speculation between him and St. Louis that they did not have a happy relationship, and that was possibly a deal that we might have seen made. So, Tarasenko, I think, is one of the names that people need to watch out for in terms of UFAs. As for the realisticness of him possibly coming to Tampa, if I had to grade that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being almost certain, 1 being La La Land, just dream about it when you go to sleep, unrealistic, I would probably give it a 3. A 3, like I said, come the trade deadline. Can't really speculate at this moment on July 28th what kind of moves are going to be made as we get closer, obviously, and players possibly talk to their representatives about what kind of contracts they want. That would be an interesting move for the Lightning to make if the money is there to spend towards the end of the season. Another name that I love, I think he's a fantastic player. Another name that jumps off the page to me, who I would love Tampa to get. I think this player, unfortunately, probably wouldn't become here. I think if in the realm of 1, once again, being unrealistic, and 10 being almost certain, I give this move an absolute, I think it's 1.5, is Timo Meier coming from the San Jose Sharks. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think he would play very well on the left side on a third or second line. Probably on the second line, I would love to see him with Cirelli and Hagel. Or maybe if you drop down Point and you throw him up to the center position, up to the winger position, and throw Stamkos down the middle, that'd be a very fantastic line to have. But unfortunately, I think San Jose, as much as they're still in the middle of a rebuild, I think he's one of the players that they're looking to keep, who is probably going to be a cornerstone player over the next couple of years. Another player that I'm looking at that would probably when I grade him in terms of not only playing ability, but realistic possible player is Gustav Nyquist from the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's going to be turning 34 this year. Still a pretty effective player. I think his style of play, obviously, he was known early on in his career for his speed. I think that you bring not only that veteran know-how, a guy like that who's been in the league for a long time now, and you bring him into a situation in Tampa where he could possibly be a third liner if, once again, we're talking about in the kind of situation where Tampa, I think, if they're in a situation, and I just want to remind the listener and the viewers, if they're in a situation where, like I said, they are, we are in a situation of almost desperation where one of the top guys is not only out, but out for an extended period of time. And Tampa is shooting for that last wild card spot. I think that these are the deals that we are talking on, the pretense. So, yeah, Gustav Nyquist, I think, would be a fantastic fit for this Tampa team. And so, those are my four guys that I think, Tampa fans should be looking at, kind of keeping their eye on over the course of the season. Not Vladimir Tarasenko, because honestly, as much as one would dare to dream and wish, I don't think that is something that is going to happen unless Tampa could finagle their way into St. Louis, somehow retaining the rest of that money for the rest of the year, as well as the fact that you kind of have to rely on St. Louis to have a crap year, which I doubt, because St. Louis is a very good team. So let me know below, whether it be on YouTube or on Twitter or on IG, or if you want to tweet directly to me on Twitter, go ahead and do that. Let me know who you want, who's on your Tampa, whether it be in the offseason or down the line, way down the line in the trade deadline, who is on your wish list for players. Because like I said, even regardless if Tampa's having a good year, you always want to look for that depth. You always want to look for a move that could potentially even improve your team even more. So who is on your wish list, Tampa fans? Let me know. So wrapping things up, and we look towards, and like I stated at the top of the show in previous episodes, I really, and I cannot stress this enough, I really hope that Julien Brisebois isn't, and I'm sure he's not, maybe he is. I'm sure he's picking up the phone and hoping that Tampa gets a well-deserved good return for Killorn, because I feel like Alex Killorn is at a point where he's going to be 34. He's already starting to slow down. He's going to be a free agent this year, and I'm sure, especially in the NHL, in which a team that is in a sport that is so much team oriented, guys know. I think guys are aware of when their time is up, and I think Tampa really needs, and I'm sure they have, but I think Alex Killorn and Tampa really need to come to an understanding, whether it be now or I would say soon. I mean, ideally within the next couple of weeks. Don't want to be getting into mid to late August, still having this kind of situation of kind of almost a staring contest of who's going to blink first. I really think that Alex Killorn needs to come to terms with the fact that his days in Tampa might be done. I mean, unless he wants to come back next season and take way less money, because his contract right now, he's going to make 4.4.5. I don't think he's a 4.4.5 player anymore. He did have a career year during the regular season. That's phenomenal. But teams take into account what you do during the playoffs. And, it's one thing to struggle throughout the postseason, but to completely disappear. And let's face it, Alex Killorn pulled off the greatest trick of all, and that was a disappearing act throughout the entire NHL Stanley Cup playoffs this past year. So that did not help his chances of potentially getting more money, especially if he comes out this year. Or, well, actually, let me correct myself, not getting more money, extending his stay in Tampa. So that is something that Alex Killorn's representatives kind of need to take into account when they are, whether it's working out a deal with the Lightning or possibly looking outside of Tampa for Killorn's next destination and the next chapter in his NHL career. But like I said, I really hope it gets resolved sooner rather than later, because this has kind of the potential to turn into a Tyler Johnson situation, what we saw over the last couple of years. After the bubble, there was all this talk about Johnson being traded. Didn't really happen. And then, what happened. And it was unfortunate to see, you never want to lose a guy like that, but especially where it's kind of almost looming over your head. And in a way, for me, at least, I feel like TJ almost overstayed his welcome. Granted, Tampa was maybe partially to blame for that in a certain way. So we'll keep an eye on that as the offseason progresses, as the summer progresses. Like I said on the last episode, we'll have some guests coming up on the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. And make sure to hit that notification bell, whether you watch or listen to this show. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.